Good afternoon, welcome to GrainTV. My name's Cody Bills. Today is Wednesday the 29th. We had the market moving lower here today. Let's turn over to the grain hedge trading platform and see where we closed off the day. Corn down 8 cents to 377.5 on the December contract. Soybeans trading down 1.25 cents to 943.5 on the November contract. And Chicago wheat here trading down 15 cents on the September contract, falling below $5 to 4.95 3/4. So prices declining again here today for corn, wiping out yesterday's gains. Now in the midst of these price declines, you'll notice that there have been some basis improvements, usually end users, and particularly for soybeans. We talked about Claypool, Indiana, boosting their basis by about 10 cents here yesterday. Well, today they boosted it again by another 10 cents. They're now plus 90 over the November contract for spot delivery. And Bunge in Morristown up 15 cents here to 120 points over the November contract. So in general, what we're seeing here is end users starting to bid up soybeans. Of course, one of the main reasons why we're bidding this up is, one, it's late in the marketing year and people have made a lot of their sales. A lot of old crop soybeans have already been sold. And two, we've been really selling off in the futures market over the last couple weeks, and it's been making producers really want to hold on to any old crop beans, unwilling to part with it at these prices after sliding 90 to 100 cents here. So in general there, we are seeing some basis opportunities, so do keep an eye on those outside of even your typical marketing region, because when you have these end users starting to bid up, they really start to dominate large regions of the map in terms of their overall economic competitiveness. So do keep an eye on marketing opportunities that you may not necessarily consider, even if they are 90 to 100 miles away. Guys, the other thing I want to talk about today is there's a few things that came across the newswire. First of all, Russia's largest farming region finished at 9.8 million metric tons harvested this year, up 650,000 metric tons from last year. In general, the Russian harvest is going very well, and there's expectations for the Russian grain crop to come in 100 million metric tons, which is about 5% below last year. So if it reaches that 100 million metric tons, it'd be 5% lower than last year, but still a very, very strong harvest. And again, we would have to compete with them on the export market. Again, this kind of a harvest is going to continue to build global ending stocks and continue to put pressure on wheat. Also, when we're talking about wheat, here in the United States, there is a spring wheat crop tour going on, and yield results seem to be very, very positive. Really, for one group, on the first day, in the last 21 years, the average yield, or the average yield expectations and projections here, it was the highest yesterday. So they were counting somewhere around 51.1 bushels per acre, compared to last year, which was 48.3 bushels per acre. Today, there was a number of groups that were continuing to travel around, checking in on multiple fields. There were some of these groups that were finding exceptional yields, and some of these groups that were finding yields a little bit less than last year during this time. So it will be interesting to see whether or not we have better than last year yields, or whether or not yields come in about on par to slightly lower than last year's record amount, record production there for North Dakota. Those results will be out on Thursday, and we'll be talking about them. Also tomorrow, we'll be talking about export sales results because those export sales numbers will be reported early on in the day. Let's talk really quick, ethanol production out here today. We saw an increase in ethanol production by a decrease in ethanol production by 8,000 barrels per day, down to 965,000 barrels per day. You'll notice on this chart the green bars representing weekly ethanol production. You'll notice sliding for the sliding for the third week in a row, yet we are still above last year's production during this time by about 11,000 barrels per day. We're above the 4-year moving average by 101,000 barrels per day. So we are very strong ethanol production here this week, I mean, of course, it did decline, but we are still well above last year, about 4.5% above last year in terms of cumulative ethanol production at this point in the marketing year. Ethanol stocks increased 89,000 barrels to a weekly total of 19.65 million barrels this week. Now let's take a quick look at the charts. We've been looking at charts all week and all last week. We were talking about some support there around that 398, and of course we slid right through that on Monday. We had a little bit of a rebound. I wouldn't even call it that much of a rebound yesterday. We kind of paused, moved a little bit higher. But today all those gains were erased and we closed near the lows. So this is not looking very good for the new crop corn contract. It almost looks like we could move back down to those lows that we saw during mid-June. Keep in mind that just the weather is on the forefront of everyone's mind. The weather has just been absolutely optimal for the development of corn crop. It's been cool here. That's going to be a positive for overall crop development. And of course we've had ample amount of showers pass throughout the Midwest. So people focusing on the weather. Bull markets constantly need to be fed bullish news. It doesn't look like we're in a bull market. We haven't had a lot of positive news come across the news wires at all here over the last couple days, and really I wouldn't be surprised if we drift a little bit lower here from this point. When you look at soybeans, we tried to make a little bit of rebound here yesterday. We got up there around the 100-day moving average around 955. We talked about this yesterday. That area could offer up some resistance, and it did here today. So that is pretty interesting. Of course, we rallied up early on in the morning, spent the rest of the day kind of selling off from those levels. Keep in mind, export sales will be released out tomorrow. Last week we had abysmal corn export sales with only 223,000 metric tons. That was a marketing year low for old crop. Hopefully we'll be able to see a pickup from that, especially with the sell-off in grain prices. One thing to keep in mind is that last week we had exceptional sales here, particularly for soybeans. So expect to see a decent amount of soybeans sold this week for new crop. Of course, last Tuesday, we had a sale of 110,000 metric tons. On Wednesday, we had a sale of 120,000 metric tons. Thursday, 180,000 metric tons. And Friday, we saw 220,000 metric tons of soybeans all sold. So these will be these will be reported in this week's export sales report. So look for a decent new crop number that helps start to catch us up to where we need to be. New crop export sales for soybeans are behind the 4-year moving average. Other than that, guys, that wraps up today's show. If you have any questions about what we talked about today, please give the office a call. Number is 877-472-4607. Thanks a lot for tuning in. We'll see you here on Thursday.